All right, so we're taking a deep dive into this really detailed medical document about cancer in animals, especially dogs and cats. And it seems like you really want to get a good grasp on how cancer works, how it's diagnosed, what the treatment options are. So let's try to unpack the world of animal oncology.
Yeah, it's a fascinating field and it's surprisingly complex. A lot of people don't realize cancer isn't just one thing, but a whole breakdown in how cells are supposed to function. If you think about it, our bodies are made up of billions of cells, all working together in a really delicate balance. They grow, they divide, they die off when they need to, and it's all part of this really highly regulated cycle.
Right, it's like a well-run city. Everything has its place and purpose.
Exactly. But with cancer, that order breaks down. Cells start dividing uncontrollably, and they ignore the signals that normally tell them when to stop. And these rogue cells, they're not just multiplying rapidly, but they're also incredibly resilient, which makes them so hard to get rid of. For example, did you know cancer cells can even create their own blood supply?
Wow, I didn't know.
It's called angiogenesis. And this process ensures that they get all the nutrients they need to survive and keep growing.
Wow, so they're really resourceful. They're finding ways to basically bypass the body's natural checks and balances. So are there like specific bad actors we can point to at the cellular level that are driving this whole process?
There are, and we call them oncogenes. These are genes that, when they're mutated or overactive, can actually push a cell toward becoming cancerous. It's kind of like having a stuck gas pedal in a car.
Hmm.
There's this constant acceleration with no way to slow down. On the flip side, we have what are called tumor suppressor genes, and these act like the brakes, trying to keep everything under control.
Okay, so it's like this tug of war between these ontogenes and these tumor suppressors. So what happens when the tumor suppressors lose that battle?
Well, that's when things can really start to go downhill. There's a really crucial tumor suppressor gene called the p53 gene, and it's sometimes referred to as the guardian of the genome. And that nickname is very fitting because it plays a critical role in preventing tumor formation. If the p53 gene is mutated or inactive, a cell basically loses one of its most important defenses against becoming cancerous.
Guardian of the genome. That's amazing. It really does sound like a superhero protecting us from this cellular chaos. So what triggers this whole breakdown in the first place? Like what sends a cell down this dangerous path to begin with?
Well, it's rarely just one single cause. It's usually more like a perfect storm of factors. Genetics definitely play a role, of course. Just like in humans, certain dog and cat breeds are predisposed to certain cancers. It's the same as how some people inherit a higher risk for certain types of cancer. But environmental factors are also at play as well.
So we've talked about genetics, but what about those environmental factors? What are some of the things that can increase an animal's risk of developing cancer?
Well, just like in humans, exposure to things like UV radiation from the sun can play a role. Certain types of pollution, even secondhand smoke. It's pretty amazing, actually. There's a specific type of cancer in cats, feline lymphosarcoma, and it's been linked to cigarette smoke exposure.
Wow, I never would have expected that connection. It really highlights how interconnected everything is, how these seemingly unrelated factors can have such a significant impact. So let's say a cell does become cancerous. How does it actually progress from there? It's not like it just stays put, right?
You're absolutely right. Cancer is always a moving target, which makes it so difficult to treat. It evolves, it adapts. So once a group of cancer cells, what we call a tumor, actually forms, it can start to invade nearby tissues, kind of like how a weed spreads its roots. We call that local invasion, and it's the first step in cancer spreading.
Okay, so it's not just about the original tumor, but also its potential to branch out, essentially.
Exactly. And even more concerning is something called metastasis. That's when cancer cells actually break away from that primary tumor site and travel to distant parts of the body.
Metastasis, yeah. That's always been the scariest part of cancer to me.
But how do these cells actually make that journey? It just seems almost impossible.
It is a really complex process, but think of it this way. Imagine a single dandelion seed being carried by the wind, right? That seed has to survive a perilous journey, facing all sorts of obstacles, to land in just the right spot to grow.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
So that's essentially what a cancer cell has to do to metastasize.
Wow.
It's incredible. They first have to break free from that primary tumor and invade the surrounding tissues. Then they need to access either the bloodstream or the lymphatic system, which is like the body's highway system.
Oh, so they're hitching a ride on the body's own transportation system.
Precisely. Once they're in the bloodstream, they can circulate throughout the body, and then eventually they'll lodge in a distant organ or tissue. But here's the thing. Less than 0.01% of cancer cells that enter the bloodstream actually survive to form new tumors, which are called metastases.
Really? That's a surprisingly small number. It is. It really speaks to how incredible our bodies are. The body has these remarkable defenses and is constantly fighting back against these rogue cells. But even if a tiny fraction survives, it can be devastating. And that's why really understanding the process of metastasis is so crucial in developing effective treatments.
So we've talked about how these cancer cells spread, but what can we actually do to stop them? What are the treatment options when an animal is diagnosed with cancer?
Well, the good news is that we do have a variety of tools at our disposal, and treatment is often what we call multimodal, which means that we combine different approaches to give the animal the best chance at success.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all approach.
Absolutely not. Each case is unique, so we really tailor those treatment plans based on the specific type of cancer, where it's located, how far it's spread, and of course the overall health of the animal.
That makes sense. So what are some of the most common treatment strategies that are used?
Well, surgery is often a primary approach, especially for these solid tumors that we've been talking about.
Hmm.
And the goal with surgery is always complete removal. We want to get those clean margins to prevent any further growth.
Right. It's like making sure that there are no stray dandelion seeds left behind to take root and start the process all over again.
Yeah.
But what about cancers that are more widespread or maybe difficult to remove completely with surgery? What options are there in those cases?
Yeah, that's where radiation therapy comes in. Radiation therapy uses high energy rays to actually target and destroy those cancer cells. And it can be used either alone or sometimes in combination with surgery.
So it's like using a magnifying glass to focus sunlight on a specific point, just this highly targeted energy to really knock out those rogue cells.
Exactly.
And then, of course, there's chemotherapy, which I know can have some pretty intense side effects.
You're right. Chemotherapy is a really powerful tool, but it can come with some downsides. It works systemically, which means that the drugs travel throughout the body to interfere with cancer cell growth and division.
Hmm.
So you can kind of think about it as cutting off the supply lines for those rebellious cells. And while it is effective, it can sometimes impact healthy cells as well, which is why you get some of those side effects.
Right. It's like this balancing act trying to eliminate the cancer cells while also minimizing harm to the rest of the body. But cancer is, as we've been discussing, notoriously tricky, and cancer cells are very, very adaptable. What about chemotherapy resistance? How do doctors and veterinary oncologists tackle that challenge?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Chemotherapy resistance is definitely one of the biggest challenges in cancer treatment. And you're right, cancer cells can be very sneaky. Just like bacteria can become resistant to antibiotics over time, cancer cells can evolve and develop resistance to chemotherapy drugs. And one reason for this is something called tumor heterogeneity, which basically means that not all cancer cells are created equal.
So you could have a tumor that's made up of these different factions of cells, and each one has its own strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. Some cells might be inherently more resistant to treatment than others from the get-go, which makes it harder to completely get rid of that tumor. And on top of that, those cancer cells can even develop these ways to pump the chemotherapy drugs right back out of their systems, rendering them ineffective.
Wow, so they really have their own little defense mechanisms to evade treatment. It's like this constant arms race. Researchers are always trying to stay one step ahead of these ever-evolving cancer cells. Are there any promising new developments in the works? Anything on the horizon that offers us hope?
There is. There's a lot of really exciting research happening right now in the field of cancer treatment, and one very promising area is something called immunotherapy, which actually harnesses the power of the body's own immune system to fight off cancer.
Oh, wow. So instead of just attacking the cancer directly, we're finding ways to empower the body's natural defenses to do the work.
Precisely. And then there are also targeted therapies, which use drugs that are designed to specifically hone in on the vulnerabilities of those cancer cells. And by being so precise, they minimize that damage to healthy cells that can sometimes happen with chemotherapy.
That sounds incredibly promising. Are there any specific examples of how targeted therapies are being used or developed right now?
There are. One really fascinating development is actually the use of artificial intelligence in cancer diagnosis. So imagine an algorithm that can analyze images of cells with incredible accuracy, picking up on subtle signs of cancer that might be missed by even the most trained human eye.
Wow, AI stepping in to help diagnose cancer. That is incredible. It sounds like we're really on the cusp of some really, really major breakthroughs in how we understand and treat cancer.
I think so too. And here's a final thought for you to consider. As we keep delving deeper into these complexities of cancer in animals, we're actually unlocking crucial insights that could revolutionize treatment not only for our pets, but for people as well. The future of cancer treatment may just lie in the paws of our furry companions.
That is a really powerful and hopeful thought. Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive into the world of animal oncology. It's been truly eye-opening to learn about the incredible research that's being done to fight this disease. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.